When Emma Reed's peaceful farm is invaded, everything she's built is thrown into jeopardy. The leader of the raid believes he can take whatever he wants, showing only arrogance and disrespect for Emma's home and strength. But what he doesn't know is that Emma holds a legendary past and the discipline to turn fear into silent power. Watch how fate delivers a stunning twist and justice rises. This story's finale is one you won't forget. The sun was sinking behind the hills, painting the sky in fading bands of orange and violet. Emma Reed leaned against the porch post of her farmhouse, her gaze lost in the quiet waves of corn swaying under the evening breeze. It was the same view she saw every day, the same fields, the same still hills, the same silence. Most people would have called it peaceful. For Emma, it was a thin veil stretched over something she never spoke of. Her world had shrunk to the size of this property. 100 acres of land, 4 horses, 2 loyal dogs, and the old 2-story house that creaked whenever the wind shifted. She kept her routine simple and disciplined up before dawn, feed the animals, fix whatever needed fixing, then sit with a mug of black coffee as the morning fog burned away. Order was important. It gave her structure, and structure meant control. But under control, memories slept, waiting. Sometimes after too many quiet nights she would wake at the faintest sound. A snapping branch outside or the low groan of the barn door could make her pulse race. She hated that. It had been nearly 10 years since she left the service, 10 years since she last held a rifle in her hands. Yet her instincts had never retired, even if she had. People in town barely knew her story. They just called her the vet woman, a lonely figure who rarely spoke, always serious, always polite. They imagined she was one of those quiet souls who couldn't let go of the past. And maybe they were right, but not in the way they thought. That night the air had an unusual stillness. The cicadas ceased their humming earlier than usual. Even the dogs who normally napped by the porch were restless, their ears pricking toward the western road. Emma noticed. She had learned long ago, when animals fall silent, something's coming. She turned off the porch light and let her eyes adjust to the dim. For a moment there was only wind and the low whistle of crickets again. Then, faintly, the sound reached her. An engine, low and uneven, crawling closer through the long, dusty path. Headlights flickered in the distance, slicing through pockets of fog. Her posture stiffened. A visitor at this hour was rare. No one from town drove out this late unless it was trouble. She let a hand rest on the rail, steady and still. The engine grew louder, rougher, like a beast charging through sleep. The truck's headlights swayed side to side as it sped down the narrow road, kicking up a storm of red dust behind it. Emma's jaw tightened. She could see shapes inside. 5 men, crowded in the cabin. Their voices carried before they even stopped. Boisterous, careless, full of the kind of laughter that had no warmth in it. When they reached the gate, the sound of splintering wood cracked through the still air. They didn't bother to stop. The truck burst through and rolled onto her land, its tires chewing the dirt road as though it belonged to them. The dogs barked. Emma whistled once, sharp and low, and they fell silent, trained, alert. Her eyes never blinked as the headlights washed over her porch. "Evening," one of the men shouted, his tone dripping mockery more than greeting. "Didn't think anyone lived way out here." Emma didn't respond. She stood by the door, the porch light still off. Shadows concealed most of her face. Her silence seemed to unsettle him, though he tried to mask it with a chuckle. "What's this place, huh? You all alone out here?" Another voice called. Her gaze flicked from one face to another. She didn't need to see them clearly. She could tell who led, who followed, who was nervous. Years of reading targets had trained her to notice the smallest tells. The twitch of a shoulder, the way someone's feet shifted when they were uncertain. The leader stood nearer the truck, confident, scanning like he owned the ground. Emma recognized the look. It was the same expression she'd seen in young soldiers who thought war made them invincible. She said finally, her voice calm but firm, "You're trespassing. The road ends a mile back." "Didn't see a sign," the man replied, smirking. "There was one," she said. "Must have driven past it." He laughed, eyes glinting in the headlights. The sound made something old stir inside her chest, a slow, deliberate pulse of instinct she thought she'd buried long ago. She took a step forward, and the wooden step creaked under her boot. It was a soft sound, but the air seemed to hold its breath. Her hands were empty, but her posture wasn't that of a frightened woman. It was the stance of someone measuring distance, weight, and possibility. The men noticed, though they couldn't explain why it unsettled them. The leader's smirk faltered for the briefest second before he muttered something to his crew. They started moving toward the porch. Emma didn't move back. She stood still, assessing. Her mind began to operate in old patterns, angles, obstacles, escape lines. The barn to her left, the fence behind, the ditch near the cornfield. She catalogued everything in silence. Inside the house, behind the door, a faint glint of metal caught the moonlight. Her old field plaque hung there, the one she'd never taken down. The words were faded, but she didn't need to read them to remember. Duty never ends. The truck's engine idled, rumbling like distant thunder. The men were laughing again, shouting nonsense to break the quiet. They thought she would be frightened. They couldn't tell that this kind of noise didn't scare her. It focused her. The night deepened. Crickets went silent once more. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl called, its echo stretching long and low. Emma's eyes never left the approaching figures. The stillness in her face was not fear. It was calculation, the calm that comes before everything changes. As they reached the base of the porch, the leader said something she didn't quite catch. But she heard the tone, casual dominance. That tone had set off too many alarms in her life to ignore. Emma inhaled slowly through her nose, eyes steady, voice quiet, but cutting clear through the dark. "You should leave. Right now." No one laughed this time. For a heartbeat, none of them spoke at all. Then one of the younger men shrugged, breaking the silence. "Lady," he said, "we're just looking around." "That's far enough," she said. The leader smirked again, taking a step closer. "You think you can stop us?" The wind shifted, carrying the scent of rain and dust. Clouds gathered, dimming the stars. Emma didn't answer. She looked past them, toward the horizon, where the sky met the earth in silver-gray lines. Something inside her clicked into place, not panic, not fear, but the precise, cold readiness of who she used to be. The old Emma Reed, the one who never missed her target, was waking up. And deep down, as that first feeling of danger tightened the air around her, she knew one simple truth. This night wouldn't end quietly. Morning arrived heavy and gray, as though the sky itself carried the memory of the night before. The broken gate swung on one hinge, creaking in the dawn wind. Emma Reed stood at the edge of her porch, holding a steaming cup of coffee while the horizon seemed to blur around her. The world looked the same, yet everything inside her had shifted. The tension of last night clung to the air, sharp, invisible, but real. She had not slept. The truck had left long after midnight, its engine echoing down the dirt road like an unfinished sentence. The men hadn't crossed her porch line, but they had tested it, studied the property, as though measuring what they might do next time. She saw it in their eyes, the careless confidence of those who mistake calm for weakness. Emma had seen men like that before. In another life, wearing uniforms and badges. In another country, under unforgiving skies. Their attitude had the same rhythm then as now. Arrogance built on ignorance. That kind of danger didn't fade with time. It adapted, changed faces, changed names. She walked slowly toward the barn, the sound of her boots dull against the dirt. The horses stirred, uneasy. She ran a hand down the flank of the nearest mare, her steady voice breaking the morning silence. "You felt it too, didn't you?" The horse snorted softly, ears flicking toward the open field. Emma's expression didn't change, but her eyes darkened. Inside the barn, dust floated through thin streams of light. The air smelled of hay and linseed oil. She knelt beside an old wooden trunk where she kept some of her service things. Documents, medals, a few keepsakes, and one sealed metal case she had promised herself never to open again. She brushed her hand over it, hesitating for several heartbeats before unlocking the latch. The case hissed softly as the seal broke. Within, cushioned by folded cloth, lay her rifle, a familiar silent weight. Her fingers rested along the barrel, the same way they once would along a line of memory. No fear, no pride, just understanding. Tools are only as moral as the hands that use them. She took a slow breath, then resecured the case and slid it back into the trunk. She wasn't ready to bring that version of herself forward again. Not yet. By afternoon, she had repaired the gate, her movements deliberate, precise. She worked the way she used to clean a weapon, with patience, focus, and no wasted motion. Beyond the fence, clouds gathered over the hills, dragging shadows across the crops. The world felt heavier, as if preparing for something unseen. At sunset, she drove into town. The general store was nearly empty, the usual chatter replaced by murmurs. Sheriff Collins sat by the counter, a heavy-set man in his 50s, polite, but often dismissive of rural problems. When Emma mentioned the truck and the men, his smile was strained, dismissive. They probably got lost, he said. Drifters. Happens sometimes. Emma studied his face. He didn't believe his own words, or maybe he chose not to. It was easier that way. She nodded once, not pressing, because she knew how these things worked. By the time anyone took her seriously, it might already be too late. On her drive back, dusk wrapped around the landscape like a mist. The road curved through tall grass and old fence lines until her house came back into view, small, solitary, but solid. She stopped the truck at the edge of the property and let the engine idle, eyes scanning the distance. The gate stood firm this time, but across the far field she caught sight of a flicker, faint, rhythmic, like the glint of metal catching sunlight. Emma cut the engine. The sound vanished, leaving only crickets. Slowly she reached into the glove compartment. Her hand brushed against the cool metal of a flashlight and the rough cloth of her field gloves. She chose neither. Instead she sat still, watching, letting the quiet return. Then she saw it again, a shimmer, a brief reflection, gone as quickly as it came. Too controlled to be an accident. Her pulse slowed, not quickened. Her body recognized the sequence of alert long before her mind could label it. Observation before reaction, always. The wind stirred through the tall grass, whispering against the fences, carrying a message she didn't like. They would be back. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but soon. Men like that didn't walk away empty-handed. As darkness deepened, Emma stepped from her truck, the gravel crunching softly beneath her boots. She walked toward the porch with the same calm precision that had earned her reputation long ago, the one the world had forgotten. But her land remembered, and so did she. The night spread out before her in silence, heavy but familiar. For the first time in years, Emma Reed realized she wasn't just guarding her farm anymore. She was waiting for war to find her again, and this time she would be ready. Evening crept along the edges of the cornfields, bringing with it a low mist that softened the outlines of fences and trees. Emma Reed moved quietly, almost invisible in the deepening twilight. She had spent the entire day repairing broken locks, double-checking shutters, walking the main paths around her property. Each step was careful, each movement deliberate, the habits of her past sliding smoothly back into place. She paused by the barn, watching the fields. Her hands rested lightly on the straps of the worn canvas bag she carried, weighing her options. The cold calm that had always come before danger settled into her veins, replacing anxiety with focus. Long ago she had learned that fear was not her enemy, hesitation was. She waited, listening to the hush that covered her land. Then, off in the darkness near the road, came a sound. Distant voices, muffled but urgent, the shuffle of feet over hard-packed earth. A pair of flashlights flickered through the grass, their beams darting in quick, nervous bursts. Emma recognized the foolish bravado in the laughter, but also the undercurrent of caution. This time they knew someone would fight back. Staying low, Emma made her way along the old irrigation ditch, her outline melting into the shadows. She didn't bluff or threaten. She let the tension of the night itself do the work. The men drew closer, cresting the low hill that overlooked the yard. Emma chose her vantage point near the old tractor, every angle providing shelter and a clear view of the approach. She could hear their leader now, his voice sharper, tinged with frustration. He hadn't planned for obstacles, for stubbornness. He called out to his crew to spread out, confident he'd flush out whoever stood in his way. But as they came further onto her land, crossing into the silent heart of the farm, Emma stood up, rooted and unafraid, her presence alone forcing the men to stop. Wind rustled the corn. One of the intruders hesitated, whispering to another that maybe they should turn back. Their courage flickered like the beams of their flashlights. Emma stepped forward enough for her silhouette to be visible against the faint porch light in the distance. Her voice was quiet, but cut through the mist. "Leave, while you still can." A pause followed. It stretched into the kind of silence that has weight. The men shifted, glancing at each other for direction, and in that moment, every detail, the slow, patient resolve in her stance, the measured certainty in her eyes, made it clear that this was not a battle they could win through bluster. The danger they had sensed before became certainty. She watched as one by one they lost their nerve. The men backed away, their confidence unraveling with each backward step. The wind carried their hurried voices away, leaving the field empty once more. Emma waited until the last shadow disappeared into the darkness. Only then did she let her muscles relax, the fight receding back into stillness. Her land was quiet again, but the night felt changed. A line had been drawn, and no one could cross it without understanding just who lived at Miller Creek. Dawn broke over the fields, pale and quiet, as if the land itself was taking a cautious breath after the long, tense night. Emma Reed moved through her morning with a measured calm. The routine of feeding the animals and walking the perimeter offered no comfort now, each familiar movement shadowed by a sense of waiting. An almost invisible line had been crossed, and nothing would be quite the same again. The memory of the previous night clung to her, the way the men's voices had echoed across the yard, the flickering uncertainty in their eyes, the invisible tension pulling tight between trespasser and protector. But sunrise brought more than memory. It brought new tracks by the hayloft, evidence that not everyone had truly left. She spent the morning checking every window, every gate, reinforcing weak spots with whatever she could find. There was no panic in her motions. Only the quiet efficiency of someone who understood time was her ally, but not her guarantee. The air grew thick with clouds. The shadows on the land lengthened. By late afternoon, the restless hush that had hovered over the farm deepened into silence. Emma prepared her space carefully. She chose her vantage points, the old porch with its sturdy posts, the window above the kitchen sink, the barn with its stacked hay bales. Each had served her before, once as places of rest, now as pillars of her defense. And as shadows stretched long and cool across her land, the intruders returned. She saw them from the far end of the field, the familiar truck moving slower this time, men keeping low, checking over their shoulders. The leader, his confidence worn thin, hesitated at the broken gate before urging his crew forward. Emma waited. She didn't hide, but she didn't stand in the open either. She moved as she once had on distant missions, quiet, purposeful, nearly silent. Her presence was a statement. The land was watched, and she was everywhere on it. The men spread out, voices little more than whispers, searching for any sign that their target had fled or cowered. But as dusk fell, Emma's command returned, not in raised voice or threat, but in the way she simply appeared, calm and resolute where they least expected. Wherever one tried skulking behind the barn, her steps preceded him. When another circled through the orchard, she was there first, her silhouette unmistakable against the dusky sky. Momentum shifted. What had begun as a group intent on domination became a faltering retreat. Their bravado drained away, replaced by caution, then unease, then fear. Emma never chased, never taunted. She simply held her ground and moved with quiet mastery, closing every exit with silent certainty. The men knew defeat when they tasted it. Their leader tried to hold them together. His shouts rang hollow, confidence flickering in his eyes. One by one, the others peeled away. nerves frayed, retreating into the growing darkness. When they finally drove off, left with nothing but their own shaken reflections in the truck's dusty windows, Emma stood by the porch step, watching the taillights disappear beyond the hills. Only then did she let herself exhale and feel the tiredness flood her limbs. Night crept in again, but this time it felt peaceful. Emma walked the quiet boundary of her land, the hush accompanied by the soft chorus of crickets. She sat on the porch, wrapped in her old army jacket, and let the silence settle around her. No celebration, no declaration, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing her world was hers once more, and that even in the face of threat, she had reclaimed her peace with unshakable resolve.